3 Stories from Rock and Roll History Part 2. Number 1. Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Porsche? In September of 1968, Janis Joplin bought a used oyster white 1964 Porsche 356C Cabriolet for $3,500 from Beverly Hills car dealer, Esther Zipper. It didn't take long before she wanted to spice things up, so she recruited one of her roadies, Dave Richards, to give the vehicle an all-new custom paint job. Reportedly, Richards was paid $500 to radically repaint the car in a psychedelic motif that included butterflies, mushrooms, portraits of the band members, a scene of Northern California, and her astrological sign, Capricorn. It took around a month to fully complete Joplin's car, but when it was done, it was a true masterpiece. Richards called the finished paint job, the history of the universe. The final step in the wild paint job was a layer of clear coat to protect the artwork. Janis loved the car so much that she used it as her daily driver. The singer's vehicle became highly recognized in the San Francisco, California area. Her fans, realizing it was her vehicle, would leave letters and notes under her windshield wipers nearly every time she went somewhere. Janis would even drive the Porsche to her local performances. At one such show in 1969, the Porsche was stolen from outside a concert venue in San Francisco. Of course, the car's unique appearance was a huge liability to the thief, so he began painting over the mural. Fortunately, he wasn't able to make much progress before the police recovered the car. Amazingly, thanks to the clear coat protection and with a little help from a body shop, the offending paint was removed without significant damage to the artwork underneath. Janis continued to drive her Porsche regularly until her death in October 1970. Following Janis Joplin's death, the car was used by her manager Albert Grossman as a courtesy car. After a while, the vehicle began to exhibit cosmetic and mechanical issues, so it was taken by Janis's brother, Michael Joplin. He managed to restore the car back to its original condition, but he also repainted it to dolphin gray. It wasn't until the 1990s that Joplin's siblings, Michael and Laura Joplin, finally brought the rock star's Porsche back to its former glory. They contacted talented artists, Amber Owen and Jana Mitchell, to properly replicate the original artwork. In 1995, the car was loaned to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum in Cleveland, Ohio. In December 2015, Janis Joplin's psychedelic Porsche was finally put up for auction, at the Driven by Disruption sale in New York City. The vehicle sold for $1.76 million. Number 2. The Who are at Monterey. Track Record was founded in 1966 in London by Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp, then managers of the rock group The Who. It was one of the first British-owned independent record labels in the United Kingdom. Track was originally intended to provide more creative freedom for The Who, but according to Stamp, at the end of 1966, he and Lambert were spurred to set up Track for their new arrival from the United States, Jimi Hendrix. The Who were already a big act in the UK, and were now gaining some attention in the US after playing some New York dates 2 months before the Monterey Pop Festival. Stamp, who had recently permed his hair to look more like his hero Jimi Hendrix, agreed to the group playing at the Monterey Pop Festival for free. The festival would be an opportunity for several bands to shine. While the British invasion had well and truly begun, only the Beatles and the Rolling Stones had made a real dent in the charts. The Who and fellow Track act Hendrix were both due to play on Sunday evening. By then, as many as 80,000 people had passed through the gates into the fairground, or congregated outside. They were hoping to see and hear something. Anything. The festival had also attracted unprecedented media coverage, with over 1,000 journalists besieging the press tent. Backstage, the Grateful Dead sound engineer turned chemist, Owsley Stanley, was distributing free LSD trips. Rolling Stones guitarist Brian Jones was drifting around dressed like a Regency prince, but looking, as Keith Richards once said, like a ghost about to leave a séance. Who frontman Roger Daltrey recalls Jones joining him, Janis Joplin, the Mamas and the Papas Mama Cass and Jimi Hendrix for a jam session in the dressing room under the stage. Daltrey said, Jimmy was playing Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band on his guitar. But, and this was the amazing thing, he was playing all the parts. He would go from a bit of orchestration, to a vocal part, to a solo, the whole thing on one guitar. The others stood and watched, accompanying Hendrix by beating out a rhythm on anything they could find close at hand. Pete Townshend felt, the Monterey gig was once again The Who being pitted against the Jimi Hendrix Experience, an act that they had performed with numerous times in England over the preceding 6 months. Townsend later recalled, "When we went to play Monterey, Hendrix was doing the show at the same time. And we had already been exposed to what I felt was a very, very unfair competition with Hendrix in the UK. All because of our relationship with the record label. And at that particular time, a group of London managers were trying to create a kind of cartel. So every time we played, he was on the bill with us. It was just awful. Just trying to match up to this really great genius." So backstage, Townsend approached Hendrix with the idea of hashing out who would go on stage first. Townsend insisted the Who go on stage first. This escalated into an argument with Hendrix suggesting they have a jam session to decide. Townsend said, Daltrey recalled it as a jam session. But it wasn't a jam session. It was Jimmy, just standing on a chair. Playing at me like, "Don't fuck with me. You little shit." With no resolution in sight, the Mamas and the Papas guitarist John Phillips suggested they toss a coin. Townsend won. One Tuesday night in September 1964, The Who, then performing as The High Numbers, arrived at London's Railway Hotel and found that the usual platform of upside-down beer crates had been replaced with a slightly sturdier, slightly taller stage. Those few inches seemed negligible until partway through the concert, when Pete Townsend inadvertently punched a hole in the low ceiling with his guitar headstock. A hush fell over the room as the audience waited to see how he'd react. Townsend was surprised and upset that the ceiling mishap had damaged his instrument, and the crowd's failure to grasp the tragedy frustrated him. He wanted a bigger reaction, so he made a bigger scene. The Who's performance at Monterey would be even more bombastic. There was an air of English decadence about the Who at Monterey. In their paisley jackets, Edwardian ruffles and puffed sleeves, the group looked like a gang of marauding dandies. Who's drummer, Keith Moon, had even accessorized his outfit with a necklace made from human teeth. The band used rented Vox amps for their set, which were not as powerful as their regular Sound City amps, which they had left in England to save shipping costs. At the end of their frenetic performance of My Generation, the audience was stunned as guitarist Pete Townsend smashed his guitar and slammed the neck against the amps and speakers. Smoke bombs exploded behind the amps. Frightened concert staff rushed on stage to retrieve the expensive microphones. At the end of the mayhem, drummer Keith Moon kicked over his drum kit as the band exited the stage. Number 3. The biggest band of the 70s, The Knobs. Jimmy Page, one of the founders of Led Zeppelin, joined the Yardbirds as their bassist in 1966 after spending time as a session guitarist. Page later switched to lead guitar alongside Jeff Beck. But Beck, due to creative disagreements and absences, was fired soon after. The band looked as though its time was coming to an end. The group played their final performance in July 1968 in Luton, England. But because the Yardbirds were still committed to playing gigs in Scandinavia, Page and bassist Chris Dredger put together a new lineup to fulfill their obligations. They enlisted the help of vocalist Robert Plant and John Bonham on drums. After Dredger left the project, John Paul Jones was brought in on bass. Page had previously worked with Jones in 1967. The new lineup changed their name to the New Yardbirds, and first played together in August 1968. According to Jones, "We locked together as a team immediately." The first hurdle for the band came when Dredger issued a cease and desist letter to stop the band from using the name The New Yardbirds for any further work. Page began looking for a new name. The story goes that Page was keen on creating a new supergroup with Keith Moon of The Who, Jeff Beck, and Moon's bandmate John Entwistle. Moon was convinced the project would not go well and remarked to Page that the project would go down like a lead balloon. Page suggested the name, Lead Balloon, to the band's manager, Peter Grant. Grant and Page thought the letter A, in LEAD, would be mispronounced by Americans. So they changed it to LED. They also changed the word, balloon, to the more iconic, Zeppelin, the largest balloon of all. So in October 1968, they took on the new name of Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin's first album was recorded in just 36 hours, with most tracks recorded live with very little overdubbing. The cover image of Led Zeppelin's self-titled first album is of the Hindenburg disaster. The Hindenburg disaster was when a German passenger airship, the LZ-129 Hindenburg, caught on fire when it tried to moor into a mast at the Naval Air Station Lakehurst and exploded. Altogether, 36 people died. The record spent 71 weeks in the UK charts after its release on January 12, 1969. By February of 1970, Led Zeppelin ruled the Billboard charts. The band members started working on a month-long European tour, which started on February 23. However, one particular aristocrat wasn't at all happy with the idea of Led Zeppelin coming to Denmark and actually tried her best to cancel the band's Copenhagen show. That aristocrat was none other than Frau Eva von Zeppelin, descendant of Count Ferdinand von Zeppelin, the German inventor and industrialist who developed, manufactured, and popularized Zeppelin airships in the 1910s. Eva von Zeppelin was outraged by the band's use of her family name. She thought that their use of it was disgraceful and utterly disrespectful, so she threatened to take legal action against the band if they played a show in Copenhagen. Page, Bonham, Plant, and Jones decided to meet Lady Zeppelin in order to prove that they were decent people and that their use of her family name wasn't derogatory in any way. According to Page, the meeting was organized at a Danish TV studio. Page said, "We invited her backstage to meet us, to see how we were nice young lads." Page continued, "We calmed her down, but when leaving the studio, she saw our LP cover of an airship in flames and she exploded. I had to run and hide. She just blew her top." The album cover enraged Frau Zeppelin all over again and she decided to continue her crusade against the band. In the days before their 1970 Copenhagen show, the band realized that Frau Zeppelin was so determined to stop them from playing in Denmark that she had hired several high-profile lawyers who were probably capable of winning the threatened lawsuit against the band. At first, Led Zeppelin was planning on canceling the show in order to avoid legal troubles, but the band members ultimately employed a tongue-in-cheek strategy. They decided to play the Copenhagen show under a different name. One name speculated in the national press was Ned Zeppelin, which Jimmy Page found humorous. After some discussion, band manager Peter Grant and Page settled on the tongue-in-cheek name, The Knobs, a playful pun on the name of the European promoter, Claude Knobs. Therefore, on February 28, 1970, Led Zeppelin rocked Copenhagen under the name. The temporary name stopped Eva Von Zeppelin and her lawyers from taking any legal action against Led Zeppelin. Also, the controversies which surrounded the band's show in Copenhagen were beneficial for their publicity because newspapers across the world reported on their witty and innovative resolution to the conflict. Bonham later said, "We should have continued as the Knobs. Just think what our album covers could have looked like." That's all for today's video. I hope you enjoyed hearing about these stories from rock and roll history. If you found this video informative or entertaining, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel for more content like this. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.